Although it can be seen as inferior to the likes of full-blown console and PC games, mobile gaming still has quite the stake in the overall gaming landscape. Even during the start of the 8th generation, there was a belief that it may even take over as the primary way of play. Obviously that never happened, but the effects of that mindset can still be felt today as companies started pooling a bunch of their developers and resources into making games for the iOS and Android platforms. Now the point of this video is not to talk about direct ports. There have been plenty of good ones made, such as the mobile ports of the Genesis-era Sonic games, but rather original titles and spin-offs in larger console series that are made specifically for mobile. I want to look at the good, the bad, and the mediocre as I discover and review what it means to make a good mobile game in an existing console franchise. It's also worth noting that I will not be covering any Nintendo, Pokemon, or Sonic apps in this video, since I already reviewed these apps in the other videos on the channel. If you'd like to see those, their links will be in the info card and in the description after the video. Let's get started. There's a lot of things that can make a game bad across any platform. Even some of the ones that were once mobile specific have begun plaguing console games, such as microtransactions. But the biggest thing I want to look at within the video is how well do the developers translate over things like mechanics, characters, and the worlds of their franchises into this new format, and how successfully they managed to merge that property into mobile as a whole. Do they respect the source material, or do they change their IP into something unrecognizable with no appeal to fans, just for the sake of getting an app out? Here are a few that I looked at that I think fell into that latter category. I wanted so badly for this game to be good. I was a huge fan of Contest of Champions and other similar fighting games on mobile before. Beyond that, Mortal Kombat is one of my favorite gaming franchises. So, this should have been the perfect meeting of two worlds, but instead I was immediately met with a bland, thoughtless game experience that spent the first few seconds I had with the game shoving ads and microtransactions into my face, before I'd even done more than one tutorial fight. And it didn't stop there. Every single thing I did in the game was followed by more microtransaction deals. Beyond that, the game had a super cluttered UI that made it hard to navigate, where everything outside the battles themselves were in submenu after submenu. I was so disappointed with this game because it was everything that makes the worst of mobile gaming wrapped into one. This one may be a little controversial because I'm actually not sure what the overall accepted opinion of this game is, but I thought Warcraft Rumble was boring, slow, and an odd addition to an otherwise very strong franchise. I liked the idea of the game being the personification of playing a D&D-like game in-universe, but beyond that, I feel like the integration of the brand was a little odd here. The gameplay felt super repetitive, and each battle was super slow moving even if one had a good strategy. I understand that they were gunning for Clash Royale, spot on the throne, but I think that game's gameplay loop is a lot snappier, and is a natural addition to the Clash franchise. I got a good deal into this game hoping it would get better, but all I was met with was the same thing over and over again. Surprisingly, I actually have quite a bit more to say about the good mobile spin-offs of franchises than I did the bad, which honestly was the exact opposite of what I was expecting going into this. A lot of the games I played did an amazing job adapting the best of these franchises into mobile, such as the idea that you yourself can become an overseer for a vault in the universe of Fallout is such an interesting idea. I've always been a fan of games like Oxygen Not Included, so these resource managing type games are right up my alley. I liked how you could really organize your space, and the different strengths and weaknesses of the survivors was a fun mechanic to mess around with to best optimize workflows. I do wish more survivors came faster in the early game, because even using the living quarters and hoping for a child can sometimes be a slow process. It makes the early game a hard hump to get over, but once you reach an equilibrium and have the base level of everything you need, it gets way better. I would say this is one of the better games I played for this video, although there is a sister game to this that I preferred a little more, and that was This game, essentially, is the exact same game as Fallout Shelter with an Elder Scrolls skin on it. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but something about the gameplay loop of this one drew me in a lot faster than Shelter did, and I think that came down to the construction options. I liked being able to choose the rooms and have them expand when like ones were put together in Fallout, but something about not only being able to decide what the overall shape of the room will be, but also being able to construct the partitions yourself made castles feel a lot more customizable to what you wanted for your people, and I appreciate that. I think this is the perfect integration of the Elder Scrolls brand into a mobile-safe gameplay loop, without losing any quality or relying too heavily into microtransactions for play to win, although there are still a big presence of them and mostly speed up certain things in the game. I used to spend a lot of time with my iPad when I was a younger teen playing the Asphalt franchise. When I got older and more into gaming on consoles, I fell in love with Need for Speed. So to find out there was a mobile spin-off of NFS that combined these two styles, I hopped right on the chance to try it. I was impressed. They managed to put what felt like a true full AAA amount of content into this game, to the point where besides the mission structure and graphics, this could easily pass as a console Need for Speed game. With all of this ambition and content though, the game unfortunately sacrificed a bit of performance in the process. The actual racing never gave me any problems, but the load times were long and the menus and other features lagged quite a bit. And I doubt it's my phone, it's only a year-old model and runs everything perfectly otherwise. Regardless of some performance issues though, this game is so much fun and it will absolutely be staying on my phone long after this video. Unlike Rumble, I think Blizzard knocked this one out of the park. I can't speak too much into franchise integration since I've not played any Diablo games before this one, but I can say that looking at the gameplay and overall gameplay loop, I had fun with this one. The combat felt super satisfying, there was a proper story and mission structure, and the graphics of the game were super impressive for mobile, and as far as I played, I didn't sacrifice any performance to make it happen. I didn't get super far because of the sheer volume of games I played for this video, but I see myself coming back to this game for sure. I would also be interested in experiencing proper Diablo, so if that's a video you want to see, let me know. This game somehow managed to translate the combat of DMC over to mobile far better than I could have ever expected. It's not a one-for-one by any means, but for the limits of control, the developers do a great job adding depth with things like sliding your finger a certain way to perform a parry, or holding down the button to air launch enemies. Everything just felt super satisfying, and just like Diablo, there was a proper mission-based story that was pretty solidly written. If there is one thing I'll complain about, it's the graphics. All of the models are super odd looking. Like, you could tell it's Dante, but he's got a squished face and a stiff robotic movement in the cutscenes. Which is more ironic considering the combat animation are a lot smoother and satisfying, even in the cutscenes. So maybe they didn't feel the need to care about walking and idling for him, considering combat is the focus. The environments are pretty good looking, but just like Need for Speed before it, the performance falls behind a lot to compensate. This game is definitely worth a try though. These final few games were my mixed bags. Not fully bad and not fully good. I figured I would put this extra category on to talk about a few of the mobile spin-offs I played that I felt entirely indifferent to. This concept is not a terrible one. Making a Tetris-based copy of all those other puzzle games was a smart move considering it was Tetris that inspired these games to begin with. That being said, this game gets super repetitive so fast. I enjoyed the game for the most part, but found myself getting bored very quickly. Not to mention, there isn't a ton to do outside the main level structure. A lot of the other games in this same genre have minigames and other game modes, and although Tetris Block Puzzle says the minigames are coming soon, currently the only other game mode offered is Endless. The game is competently made and functional, but simply does not have a ton of staying power on replayability. This is your basic, standard, match 3 title with a Monster Hunter skin stapled onto it. I will give them some credit for how they integrated the property into the game, making the town building aspect of it look and feel like it would belong in the series. There was also just kind of a funny small story to go along with it, but other than some dialogue, there was really no impact on the overall gameplay. You played the same types of levels over and over again with some short and simple cutscenes occasionally. Other than that though, there's not a whole ton here that separates it from any other match 3 game you could play, with the very tiny exception of being able to move pieces diagonally instead of just the standard 4 directions. I will have to check out Monster Hunter Now at some point, which is their Pokemon Go knockoff. If you're a fan of Monster Hunter and mobile gaming, you might find some enjoyment here. Otherwise, you can steer clear of this one. Tomb Raider is one of my favorite franchises of all time. In terms of current mobile games, there are 2. Relic Run is okay, but I don't have a whole ton to say about it, so instead, I thought I would delve into the second one, Tomb Raider Reloaded. This almost went into my good category, but after playing for a chunk more, I decided that it fit better in the mediocre for me. If you've ever played Arch Hero, it's just a one-for-one copy of that game with Tomb Raider. The Tomb Raider branding and franchise does fit well in a game of this style, but the core content of the game loop gets very tedious and boring after a handful of levels played. They tried to spice it up with a couple of different room types, but they don't come often enough for them to break up the flow, so you're left with a loop of run over here and shoot until the enemies catch up, and then run over here on the other side to shoot until the enemies catch up. Rinse and repeat until the room is cleared. This problem only exists because for some reason you aren't allowed to be firing while moving. In order for it to auto-fire, you must be standing still. This just makes the game into a cat and mouse slog, and as previously mentioned, even the couple of rooms that aren't like this end up being so infrequent that they might as well not exist. The only reason I chose not to put this in the bad category was because the game is functional, it looks pretty good, and does a pretty solid job at integrating the franchise. It just isn't any fun to play, and honestly, I feel like above all that is the most important thing, especially with a platform such as mobile where everything is pick up and play. When I was making my Sonic Dash video a while back, the original plan was to make the video for all of the Sonic mobile games, not just Dash. But once I found out that Runner's Adventure wouldn't run on my phone for some reason, I decided that it was better just to make it about the Dash games because there was only one other non-Dash game without runners. That game was Sonic Jump. Seeing as it didn't fit that video, I decided to revisit it for this one instead. Unfortunately though, it does end up in the mediocre bin because although the graphics and brand integration are nice, just like almost every other game in this category, the gameplay does not change at all and stays stagnant the entire duration of the game. Sonic Jump is a Doodle Jump knockoff, and that's all it really does. The boss fights can be fun, but it doesn't actively change anything about the gameplay loop. I wanted to like this one badly because it's my boy Sonic, but I just found myself bored like so many of the other games on this list. Before going into this video, I did know a handful of these mobile spin-offs existed, but as production began, I fell down a rabbit hole I never expected to, and realized they were far more than I would have ever been able to name. I didn't even include every game I played in this video because I honestly didn't have anything interesting enough to say to include them. But in the end, I'm super happy to experience this side of gaming in depth, as I feel like it's often overlooked genre of game, and the entries that exist in major series are usually ignored by the fanbase at large. I think as phones get more powerful, it's getting easier for these companies to put out expansive, well-made, and faithful entries on the App Store, and I'm excited to see where we go from here on this front. To answer my question from the beginning of the video, I personally think what makes a good mobile spin-off is when the game stays true to the series it hailed from, but formats it in a pick-up-and-play style that fits the quick pace of the mobile market. Having good graphics and polish are really nice, but I think in the end the biggest contributing factor to the fun is having a variety of different missions and gameplay styles that keep things interesting for longer, while also not force-feeding microtransactions at every single corner. It seems like a lot written out, but my good category proved that there are franchises and developers who have managed to pull it off. At some point, I'd like to look at direct ports of games on phones, and if I can ever figure out where to go for it, I'd also like to explore old Java games as well at some point. If that's of any interest to you, let me know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe while you're down there. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.